Hey y'all, thank you very much for tuning in today. I hope you're having the most excellent Fursuit Friday. So for today's Storytime with Shrapnel, I'm going to talk about my first ever fursuit that I tried to make myself. But before I go into that, just going to remind you all, I'm going to be doing a Q&A session in the next couple of days. If you have any questions you want to ask me, drop them in the comments below and I'll be happy to ask them, okay? So a great many years ago, I mean, I'm talking like 10, 15 years ago, when I first joined the fandom and thought I'd go to a furry convention, I got this crazy idea into my head that, you know, I'm going to make myself a fursuit. Because I'd looked online at fursuit prices and they were a lot. And while I had a lot of friends in the fandom, I didn't know any fursuit maker friends at the time who would do me one cheap. So I figured, you know, I'm going to make one myself. So in typical me style, I figure I'm not going to look up guides online. I'm not going to look on how-tos or anything like that. I'm just going to wing it and, you know, do it myself completely. Now, my very first attempt was absolutely abysmal. Involved getting, you know, soldering wire and trying to make it into a mesh frame in the shape of a fox face, which didn't work at all, crumpled, and I gave up on that and figured, you know, I'm going to make it out of upholstery foam. So I go to my local homeware store and I'm like, do you have upholstery foam? And they have it. So I figure, yeah, I'll buy that. I'll buy like a dozen sheets of this like inch thick foam. I take it home. I get this super strong glue that I have on hand and I just layer it all up into a great big block about this big and figure, great, now I'll carve this into a fox head. And, you know, I'm hacking this thing together now, you know, carving it with like a kitchen knife type deal. And I'm going through it and I've still got some of that wire around. So I'm thinking, I bet I could articulate this jaw. So, you know, my first ever fursuit attempt, I'm trying to put a moving jaw on it. You know, what kind of craziness is going on there? And then I come to, like, doing the fur, and I've just bought, like, you know, cheap fun fur off the internet. And, you know, okay, my sewing's pretty decent, so I just start hacking this thing together in roughly the same fur pattern as a black fox. But I'm like, no, my fursona has hair, long red hair, so I'm going to make noodle hair. And having absolutely no fursuit experience at all at the time, you know, I've completely covered the mouth. I'm looking at the eyes and I'm like, how am I going to do the eyes? I don't know how to do eyes. I can't even think about how to do the eyes. So I'm like, oh, I've got an idea. And I pop some lenses out, some black shades that I have on hand and pop them in as eyes. And, you know, I wanted this thing to be ready for Eurofurence at the time. So I'm in a real hurry. I'm doing this on my mum's, you know, living room floor. And I'm like, I went out of red fur. So I've got this great big hole at the back where there's no fur, no hair, nothing. And I'm thinking, what am I going to do? So I just run some zigzag string across and pull it tight, and, you know, that's a good one. And at the time, I didn't realise how terrible this looked. In my mind, it was a dog's bollocks. This thing was absolutely amazing. I absolutely loved it. You know, I'm thinking to myself, yeah, I'm a fursuiter now. This is great. This thing's awesome. And off I go to Eurofurence with some friends, and I'm showing this thing around to all my mates. I'm like, look what I made. Look, I made a fursuit. I'm a fursuiter now. This is awesome. And, you know, none of them are saying anything. None of them are telling me how terrible. I mean, these are all people like professionally made fursuits and stuff. And there I am with this, you know, heap of garbage essentially. And none of them are saying a word. None of them even mention how bad this fursuit. Oh, they're all just nodding. Oh, yeah, that's nice. And, you know, no one tells me that I've essentially made a walk-in horror that would give Cthulhu a run for his money. So after wearing this fursuit once, realising how bad it was, and just stuffing it in a hole in my mum's attic for the next 15 years, you know, I figure nothing to do with that. I don't even want to remember that fursuit ever again. Happy days. I ended up getting this fursuit about 4 years ago. You know, awesome. Never thought about the old one. Well, on a recent trip to my mum's, she'd been clearing out the attic, and guess what she found? That's right, people. She found my first ever attempt at making a fursuit, and here it is. Meet you, Mark 1. Look at this, look at this, look at this amazing moving jaw and these lifeless eyes and this noodle hair that's, you know, flat as a pancake inside. And if we come around here, check this out. We got horrific hair. I will get underneath it. You should have some great big blue foam visible there where I've just kind of stitched it together horrifically. You know, this thing is a real horror, but thinking about it, looking back, this was all learning. I realise now that, you know, it was a horror, it was terrible, but I didn't have a clue what I was doing. This is my first ever time. But just look at it, look at those lifeless non-eyes where I figured I'd put bloody aviator shade lenses as eyes. It's, This thing is terrible, but I wouldn't change it for world. I would not change my experience in a furry fandom for world. This may be terrible, but it's part of my history. I thought it was lost in the annals of time, but it's back now. Miyu version 1. Before I even had Shrapnel as a persona, you know, this was me back in the early 2000s. This is what my persona looked like. I'm lost. So yeah, the moral of this story, there isn't really a moral of this story, but if there was one, it's never give up, never surrender. You may stumble, you may make mistakes to begin with, but you will get there in the end. And you flappy jaw. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope you enjoyed meeting Miyu version 1. I'm not going to wear him simply because he's been up in the attic for 20 years. I don't know what it's like inside there, and it was horrific back then. It's going to be even worse now. But you all have a great day. You have a most excellent weekend. I hope to see you guys in the next video. Other than that, you all take care now, and ta-ra. Today I'm going to do a quick episode of so today I'm going to for guides online. I'm not going to look at the